trace the primal light. Let the clouds heal me of the stains, gently wipe the sorrow of my life. I dream.
Okay guys, we're gonna probably go ahead and get started here soon. We are starting a little bit earlier, so we're about 9 minutes from the start time, but this is definitely going to be a productivity build. So this motherboard being the Godlike, as you guys can see here, the MSI Meg X870E Godlike. This is the cream of the crop. This is the highest end X870E motherboard, probably for the remainder of the entire generation until there is a new chipset. It doesn't get any better than this one. So, in terms of obviously the price is extremely expensive. However, if you're looking at building a long-term AM5 build that's going to last the entire remaining duration of this socket's lifespan, this is probably a good choice if you're willing to spend the money on the board, for instance, and if you are trying to build some kind of productivity machine and you're not really wanting to step up to, say, Threadripper or Sapphire Rapids. So this is definitely an interesting motherboard. This motherboard solves some of the problems or the setbacks that I have run into with the Asus Crosshair Hero, namely the sense that the Hero doesn't give you enough PCIe options, whereas the Godlike corrects that problem, and we're going to get into that when we do the unboxing, or when we actually just look at the board. But this one is really the only one. So I guess originally, so we go back 2 years ago now, when AM5 first launched with the Ryzen 7000 series CPUs. The highest end board that I always wanted to get at the time, which I was never able to obtain back then, was the Meg Ace, the X670E Ace from MSI. And because it was never available, it was always out of stock, I could never get one, I ended up settling on the Gigabyte Aorus Master, which has served me well. However, there is a problem with the board that I have, particularly the X4 PCIe slot doesn't really work reliably anymore for some weird reason if you have a bunch of the M.2 drives populated. So unfortunately, I do need to swap out that board. So this motherboard is going to be the replacement to that. So this Godlike from MSI is going to become the new Tech Thursdays live stream computer. That's effectively what this will end up becoming. So for me, it is kind of it's an upgrade from X670E to X870E. This gives me slightly more functionality for my PC. I can do a few more things with this that I cannot do with the Aorus Master. So that's pretty much one of the reasons why I'm getting this. And then this will basically run me through the remainder of the AM5 socket. So meaning any newer CPUs that come out, like Zen 6, for example, or Zen 6 X3D, or whatever comes down the pipe in the next couple of years, I can just do a drop-in upgrade with this motherboard. I don't have to upgrade from this, because I don't really see anything significantly better than this coming out anytime soon. There are rumors that MSI may release an X870 Ace sometime next year. There are rumors circulating about that. I don't know if that's confirmed from MSI, but I don't think the Ace can overtake the Godlike. There's probably going to be the same functionality. It remains to be seen. Currently, MSI is the only motherboard manufacturer that is doing what is called bandwidth sharing. So instead of GPU, or not GPU, I shouldn't say GPU, instead of PCIe, you either do this or you do that, but you can't have both. MSI is the only vendor that allows you to share the bandwidth, as opposed to pick and choose. You either get the X4 slot running or you get an SSD on the motherboard, but you can't have both active at the same time if it exceeds the lane count. What MSI has done, and we looked at this a few months ago when we were looking at the Tomahawk, because the Tomahawk was kind of a preview into showing us what the Godlike is capable of. So there's only 2 motherboards currently that do bandwidth sharing, allowing you to run multiple peripherals or devices across the same exact PCIe lane. So what do I mean by bandwidth sharing? So for example, on the Godlike and the Tomahawk, the USB 4 ports are wired to, as we know, if you guys have been watching my live streams, we've done the block diagrams many, many times, the ASM4242 chip that's soldered on the motherboard. Now that requires 4 lanes of PCIe Gen 4 to operate. Now MSI has wired those directly to the CPU. on both the Godlike and the Tomahawk. Basically, every motherboard vendor has done the exact same thing. What MSI has done differently, however, particularly with the Godlike and the Tomahawk, is they allow those 4 lanes to not only be used by the USB 4 controller, but also an additional M.2 drive. And those are Gen 5 lanes to the CPU directly connecting them, which means you can run a second Gen 5 SSD in addition to the first one, but that second Gen 5 SSD shares the bandwidth. It shares that highway. Think of it like the lanes, the traffic is being shared between the USB 4 controller and the second Gen 5 SSD. So there could be some bottlenecking happening there. I don't really think it's going to be too much of a problem, although I will definitely test that. That is something that I am going to be testing because this is going to become my main streaming computer going forward. So this one will be used in production. This isn't going to be used for, like overclocking guides. Maybe I'll do a couple of those. Right now,
Welcome
hey Francisco,
to the Godlike
welcome
Club.
to the Godlike Club.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, I saw your message. I remember we went a little bit back and forth on some of the messaging. I'm surprised when you said you got one. I was like, wait a minute, it's really in stock? And sure enough, it was. Although it was challenging for me to get this. Newegg actually kind of screwed up my order the first time. So I actually had to like redo the whole thing with them. But, that's unrelated to this stream. So anyway, much appreciated though. The Godlike is definitely a motherboard that is meant for some sort of high-end use case other than gaming. That doesn't mean that you cannot build a gaming PC with the Godlike. I just think, personally, in my opinion, if you're going to spend this much money on a motherboard, you really need to be doing something with the computer other than just playing games, because in order to see the value, to see that return on investment of buying something like this, you really need to be doing some kind of heavy lifting with your computer, whether it's, video rendering or you're doing some kind of VDI workstation stuff or something similar that mirrors what you typically see done on a Threadripper-based system. You can get very close to that functionality with this motherboard, and we're going to talk about that when we get into it. So actually what we'll do here, let me catch up with some of the comments here. Streaming PC, not gaming. You mean gaming and streaming? Yeah, you can do both in one. Yes, that's what I'll be doing with this. But I guess a little bit of history on the current streaming computer. So originally, my goal was to. So you guys may know, if you guys have been watching my live streams, we did build a Asus Crosshair Hero based system a few months ago. That was the very first X870E motherboard that I looked at. So that motherboard, I never intended for that motherboard to be used as my live streaming computer. Originally, the goal of having the Crosshair Hero was so that I could do overclocking content on the channel. So we could do like memory overclocking live streams or CPU overclocking live streams. I meant to use the Asus Hero in that manner. I never got to do that though, because my Gigabyte, my old 2 years, 26-month, 28-month-year-old Gigabyte X670E Aorus Master, one of the PCIe slots started acting weird. The one that I plugged my capture card into started causing me problems, and that's the Tech Thursdays computer. So I was having problems with that motherboard, and I opened a support ticket with Gigabyte, and Gigabyte's like, okay, we're going to have to do an RMA, so you're going to have to ship us the motherboard. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to have to do all of this. I'm going to have to pull the Gigabyte board out of production, which means I'd have to take it out of the Tech Thursdays PC, and I'd have to replace it with something else while it's being shipped over to Gigabyte. That could take like a couple weeks. So because of that, I pulled the Hero from Asus, that board that we did that live stream build on a few months ago. I put that. So currently, my Tech Thursdays computer is actually my overclocking PC, which was never meant to be a live streaming PC. It was meant to sit on a test bench. Kind of like you see the other larger overclocking channels, like Scatterbencher, for example. He uses a Crosshair Hero for his overclocking guides. So I was planning on doing the same thing, but I never was able to do that because of what happened with my live stream computer. Now, enter the Godlike. Here we are with the Godlike. This solves the problem because now I can use this to enable me to do my editing, my streaming, the gaming, whatever, the stuff where I interact with you guys, that is going to be done on the Godlike going forward. That way I'll be able to use the Asus board for overclocking. Now, technically, you know, when I think about it, the Godlike is so high-end, this thing is just as capable for overclocking guides as the Hero is. In fact, this motherboard might actually be technically in some ways more capable than the Hero. So I am going to have to do some testing offline to figure out the upper bound limits on this board versus the Hero. But what I can tell you guys is this motherboard is a 10-layer PCB, which means theoretically, in terms of specs, this one should have the best support for memory overclocking, because the more layers you have, the better noise, your signal to noise ratio is better, because the layers of the board are able to isolate the electrical noise so you get less interference between your memory channels. And that translates into better signal integrity, and ultimately that means better overclocking and higher speeds. So technically the Godlike might actually be the best overclocking board, but I'll have to test that to make sure. Asus, on the other hand, the Hero has the fancy Nitro Path technology. This does not have that, as far as I know. That's an Asus patented thing. But that is going to be useful for 2 sticks of memory overclocking, whereas I think this guy, the Godlike, might actually be good at overclocking 4 sticks of memory. So we will definitely look at that in future content. So let's see what people are saying here. MSI Godlike, how many NVMe's? Did you watch the unboxing video? We're going to show it off here in a little bit. I'm parting out my current PC. So this motherboard, this is probably going to be a limited run. I don't think MSI is going to produce that many of these because, first of all, it's so expensive that I think that it's kind of a Halo tier product. This is kind of like a 4090. It's a Halo tier product. It's kind of there. Yes, it's useful. Yes, it has its use cases. But the average person who's just wanting to build an average gaming PC, they're not going to buy a 4090. They're not going to buy a Godlike. These things are like, they're kind of like pointless. They're just there as like set pieces to make consumers look at a company's brand and study up on their products. So, you know, that's kind of what this is for. However, this actually does have tangible benefits to someone like me who's going to use it for productivity. And we will talk about that because I am going to use every single PCIe lane and every single port that this motherboard offers. So let's go ahead and open this. Actually, before I do that, I want to show you guys the hardware, the other hardware that we're going to be using. So originally, I was going to go with an air cooler, but I decided, you know what, we're just going to go with a 360 AIO. This is the Deepcool. Here it is again, the Deepcool LT720. This is the only 360 AIO that I have. So if you guys watched the 9800X3D live stream build that I did, I think 2 weeks ago or a week ago or something. So we used this cooler for that live stream. But since then, I have put a Noctua NH-D15. Originally, I was going to put the D15 on the Godlike. And we got a new sub. Thanks for the sub. I got to make this larger. I can barely see the screen. I'm so far away from my monitor. See if I can put this here. Whoever subscribed, thanks for the sub. Trying to make this larger. Actually, let me move this. This will help. There we go. That I should be able to see the subscription notifications. I'm sitting pretty far away from a 27-inch 4K monitor. 27-inch 4K is like really, really small, so everything is like real small right now. So it's hard for me to read the screen. So anyway, this is the only liquid cooler that I've got. So we're going to be using the LT720. Originally, I was going to use a Noctua D15, but then I started thinking, well, if I put the D15 on the Godlike, it's going to cover up like so much of the RGB. It's going to cover up the SSD cover, or the cooler, the heatsink, it's going to cover up this dragon thing here. So I won't really be able to show off the build if I use an air cooler. That doesn't mean I won't switch to an air cooler in the future, though. So you just got the 32-inch UCDM. Okay, that's the QD OLED one, right? That's a really nice monitor. Okay, so we're just going to be using the same liquid cooler. Brandon. Thanks for the song. So we're going to use this. And then for the CPU, James, thanks for the sub. Much appreciated. So the CPU we're going to go with is just going to be the 9950X. Like I said at the beginning, this is going to be a productivity, almost like a workstation-based computer that I could also game on. Matt, thanks for the sub. Much appreciated. So we're going to go with the 9950X. Now, if the 9950X3D was out now, I would definitely go with the 9950X3D and pair that up with a Godlike, because I think that would be a really, really good choice. But in this case, this is the best I've got. Currently, the 9950X is the closest CPU. This CPU can score over 45,000 in Cinebench R23 multi-thread. And like I said, we're doing a productivity workstation. That means we need multi-thread performance to crank out those 4K videos at lightning speed. So that is the reason why we're going with a high core, high thread count. This is a 32-thread consumer CPU. This is the highest end consumer CPU currently on the market in terms of how new it is, in terms of how energy efficient it is, and the fact that it has access to the new Godlike. So it has Zen 5, the brand new Zen 5 architecture. So next year, the 9950X3D will probably be a very good choice for anyone looking to build a high-end computer like this. But anyway, like I was saying, this thing gets really close to rivaling the entry-level Threadripper. So this thing, when overclocked, this can get to like 45,000 on Cinebench. Just to put things into perspective, a 24-core Threadripper 7960X can score around 50,000 in Cinebench. So this is still, with an overclock, this is still 5,000 points less than a Threadripper, an entry-level Threadripper at that. However, Threadripper is like, if you want to buy a Threadripper, you're basically spending like the amount of money you would have to spend on a 4090, plus you have to buy the motherboard, and the motherboard is like $900, $600, whatever, so it's cheaper than the Godlike, but the CPU is significantly more expensive than the Godlike, so a Threadripper build ends up being a lot more expensive than a Godlike plus a 9950X. And that doesn't even factor in that you have to buy special server memory for the Threadripper, whereas you can buy whatever DDR5, regular DDR5 for the Godlike. So that is another reason why there are some advantages to going with the regular standard Ryzen for building a high-end desktop. I call it a mini HEDT. Someone in my, someone who's been watching the channel for a long time said that the new Intel Z890 platform and the new Intel Core Ultra feels like a mini HEDT. Yeah, technically the 9950X feels the exact same way. Like this plus a Godlike is basically a mini HEDT. It gets pretty close. It's just missing the PCIe lanes. But yeah, we're going to get pretty close to matching a Threadripper with this sort of setup. Does MSI have the best BIOS? That's a good question. That's going to come down to personal preference and what you're familiar with. So currently, as somebody who has recently tested all 4 of the motherboard brands, the one that actually seems the easiest to use is either Gigabyte or ASRock. MSI takes a little bit getting used to because they literally just came out with a brand new modern BIOS. So even if you're familiar with MSI, the new MSI BIOS is different looking than the old MSI BIOS. They're calling it Click BIOS 10, I believe. So it's the 10th generation of Click BIOS for MSI, and it is a bit different looking. So Yeah, personally, I find ASRock a little bit easier to navigate just because they use a lot of folder-based menu icons at the top. You do not get that with MSI, and you do not get that with the others. It depends. Asus does give you like a directory listing, but Asus tends to have a whole bunch of duplicate settings all over the place. So like you go and change something in one part of the Asus BIOS, and you end up like looking around in the BIOS, you find the exact same setting in a different place. It's like two different places for the exact same setting. So that can be very confusing for some people, unless they really, really know what those settings are for. So Asus can be a little bit complicated in that regard. MSI is very straightforward, but because it's a new UI, even if you're a veteran, you're still going to have to reacclimate to where things are and how the new look and feel is, if that makes sense. I hope that answers the question. Doesn't Godlike have a different... it's the same as Tomahawk and Carbon. So if you guys watched the live stream we did where I was showcasing the Tomahawk, because we did a live stream build with the Tomahawk, the Godlike, the Tomahawk, and the Carbon, all the new X870 boards, they all, from MSI, they all have the same BIOS. It's just a different color scheme. Okay, so we're going with the deep cool, and then for the RAM, I have here my trusty, this is my trusty, well, I guess we can use this camera right here. So we're going with the G-Skill Trident Z5, and we have two of them. So we're going to go with 4 sticks of memory because the Godlike is a 10-layer PCB, so I don't have any sort of worry about this. Now this is going to be 96 gigabytes of RAM. We're just going to do this just to show that it works. Later on, I will do some follow-up content on the channel with higher memory capacities. Currently, I wanted to do 192 or 128. I cannot do that because my other computers are using that RAM. So, for example, if those of you who saw my 192 gigabyte video from January, since that time, I split that memory back into 2 kits. So originally, I had 96 plus 96, so that's 192 gigabytes of RAM. That was in one computer once upon a time, but then I defused them back into separate kits. One of them went to the Asus Crosshair Hero, which we're streaming on right now, by the way. So we're streaming on a computer that has 96 gigabytes of RAM across 2 sticks. The other kit went to the Intel Z890 Maximus Hero. So my Core Ultra has 96 gigs, and my live stream has that. JM, thanks for the sub. So that's why I cannot do 192 right now, because I have that split across 2 different machines. So we are going to do 96, but that's going to be with 2 48 gig kits. So this is 48 gigabytes right here, 48 gigabytes right here. So the total is going to be 96 gigabytes at 6,000. So, okay. That's what we're going to be using. And then for the power supply, this is going to be new to me. This was on Black Friday special. So if you guys are looking for power supplies, at least based off of the Micro Center pricing, Super Flower LED X3. This is an ATX 3.1, which means this power supply is fully capable of supporting the upcoming RTX 5090, because this power supply is a 1300 watt 80 plus gold. And right now, this is on sale at Micro Center for like $160. $160 for a brand new ATX 3.1 from Superflower with 1300 watt capacity. So I think this is the best deal if you're going for a super high-end build. You're going to need heavy-duty power supply. So yeah, like I said before, 1100 watt is the minimum. If you're going 5090 and you want the connector to be able to go all out, you're going to want a minimum of 1,100 watts, 1100 watt or better, for the power supply to be able to deliver the full 600 watts. Otherwise, it will be capped at 450 watts. So I have a whole video explaining on how that works. So, okay. So this is 1300 watts. So we are 5090 ready. ATX 3, not 3.0. This is 3.1, which means this is going to do 12x or 2x6. The 12 volt 2x6 or whatever. The newer connector, this one has the newer cable versus the older cable that was catching fire and having all kinds of problems. So we're not going to have to worry about the fire hazard and all that stuff with this brand new power supply from Superflower. That being said, this is also the first time I have ever used a Superflower power supply. Up until now, all of my power supplies have either been Seasonic or CWT. Whereas with Seasonic, I've only had one Seasonic, and that Seasonic doesn't like very high transient voltage spikes. So I never use my Seasonic for high wattage GPUs because it will turn off the computer. So I'm stuck using my CWT, which is very good. And I've been using CWT for like 10 years. So CWT is my go-to choice. I've never used Superflower. If you are somebody who has an EVGA power supply, most likely it is a Superflower power supply under the hood. So this is the equivalent to an EVGA high-end power supply. That is what we're going to be using here. So that is the power supply. Superflower makes, yes, Superflower and CWT are very, very good. All right, and then finally, for the graphics card, we're going with the trusty Sapphire Radeon RX 7900 XTX. This used to be in the stream computer that we're streaming on right now. I took this out because I wanted to feature the Nitro in a build. I have never featured the Nitro in a PC build. So I took it out of that. We're currently streaming on a Intel Arc A380 from ASRock, and that's what we're using with the live stream computer. So that proves you don't actually need a high-end GPU just to do live streaming. So anyway, so this is going to become the live stream computer. So it's going to go back into the same purpose. So that's the GPU. I want 24 gigabytes. 24 gigabytes means that we have lots of video memory. Typically, you want 1 gigabyte of video memory for every physical core. So because we are using a 9950X, this is a 16 core, which means the minimum amount of video memory should be 16 gigabytes of VRAM. That means the 9950X, in order to run optimally for applications like Adobe Premiere and all of the different productivity apps like DaVinci Resolve, etc., this CPU must be paired up with, at minimum, an RX 6800 or anything better that has 16 gigabytes of VRAM or more. If you pair this up with a, let's say, a 12 gigabyte GPU, you are going to bottleneck the CPU in those apps because you're not giving the cores enough video memory. So just keep that in mind. If I have a 16-core CPU, I must have a 16 gigabyte VRAM GPU or better. And the 7900 XTX has 24 gigabytes. So we are over provisioned. This is basically overkill for the 9950X, which means I don't have to worry about any sort of GPU upgrade for the foreseeable future for productivity. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the Godlike here. Actually, well, there's one more thing, although we'll probably get to it later. So let's go ahead and look at the Godlike. Let me look at the chat, actually. Let's see what people are asking, if there's any questions. You're getting the new Seasonic Prime 1600 watt Noctua edition. Okay. That's interesting to know. Oh, you're talking about the VRAM stuff? AD102 is plenty for me, and I don't care for path tracing. But is there any technical reason for 1 gigabyte of VRAM per core, or is this some... This is based off of the application developers. This information is coming from a lot of the application developers. We're not talking about gaming, by the way. We're talking about productivity. Now, that doesn't mean you can't use that as a rule of thumb when building a gaming computer. So the reason why, so if you guys have watched my live stream builds, I never have any problems with resource issues on my PC because I'm typically streaming the game from a productivity computer. And productivity computers have lots of system memory and lots of video memory. So I never run out of resources. A game can be basically coded like garbage and be so unoptimized, but because I have all these system resources, I can just throw hardware at the problem and the problem goes away. We saw this when we were live streaming Monster Hunter Wilds, that open beta test a few weeks ago. So if you want to see the difference between, you know, like a computer that only has 32 gigs of RAM versus one that has like 128 gigabytes of RAM, you can go ahead and check out some of those live streams. Typically, the rule of thumb is for a CPU, you always look at the CPU. The CPU determines your system memory amount and your video memory on your GPU. For every core, there should be 1 gigabyte of video memory. For every core, there should be 4 gigabytes of system memory. So that means if I have a 16 core, 16 times 4 equals 64 gigabytes of RAM. So a balanced build for this 9950X with the Godlike should be at minimum a 16 gigabyte graphics card plus 64 gigabytes of RAM. This CPU should never be paired up with anything less than 64 gigabytes of RAM. And ideally for the GPU, it should have at least 16 gigabytes of video memory. And this is the reason why the smaller CPUs, like the 9800X3, for instance, that CPU can get away with lower resources and not run into like resource issues, I should say, because it's only 8 cores. So because the 9800X3D is an 8-core CPU, that means it only needs, ideally, it only needs an 8 gigabyte GPU. Now, realistically, we've seen games need more or demand more than 8 gigabytes. So it really has something to do with the CPU in that scenario. It's really the game itself. So in general, though, the rule of thumb is 1 gigabyte of video memory per physical core and 4 gigabytes of system memory per physical core. So going back to the 9800X3D, the minimum amount of RAM that a 9800X3D should have is no less than 32 gigabytes of RAM and 8 gigabytes of VRAM. And this is how a lot of people, a lot of companies who do pre-builds, for instance, they will build their PC around those kind of reference specs, if that makes sense. Now, obviously, when it comes to gaming, it's going to depend on things like the monitor resolution, which is going to also have a huge impact on how much video memory a PC should have. So, but in general, for productivity apps, you always remember 4 gigabytes of RAM per core, 1 gigabyte of VRAM per core. That is the easiest way. If you memorize that logic, you can't really go wrong in building a PC, regardless of what the PC is going to be used for. You're new to the channel? Just providing real world stuff compared to me just sitting there going, oh cool. Yeah, so we're gonna do a lot of like overclocking stuff too in the future. I needed to swap my motherboard that's been having problems with the
This
PCIe
is how
slot
you finish
for
out
something
the
like
year.
this. So this
A
is gonna
godlike
fix
build.
that problem. So let's go ahead and look at this. Yeah, this is definitely gonna be the last live stream build. I can't really like go beyond the Godlike, right? Godlike is basically the top. So this is how you finish out the year. I would agree with the Godlike. You go out, you know, guns blazing. This is it. We're going all in. All right, this is it, guys. We're going to open it up now and take a look. This is a huge box. It is like, look how thick this is. It's a really heavy box, too, because this motherboard comes with a lot of accessories. So it has this nice little, like, insert here. This cardboard insert. And then it has a lot of info. If you guys saw the unboxing video, this was shown. So we'll set that over there. Okay. Hey Mitchell, thanks for the sub. Welcome to the channel. Alright, so I've tried to put the camera here on a different angle so that we can get a better shot of what I'm looking at here. So we're going to open this up. And there it is. The box opens up real fancy. Beyond the norm. Godlike. Meet the Godlike. That's it. Now, will it stay open? I'll try to pick it out here without the box closing on me. And it closed on me, that's fine, we got it. Alright, so this is it. It's heavy, it's very heavy. It's just like the Tai Chi from ASRock, extremely heavy, lots of metal. Let's move this like this, I guess. We only really need the board for now. But I may actually need some of these accessories that are in here. So let's kind of go over what else is in here. So, I don't know, does my light help if I turn on my little light here? I don't know if that's really necessary, but we'll run it on level 2. Okay, so obviously in here we get the M.2 Gen 5 Expander Z. So this card, it looks like a GPU. This literally looks like a workstation graphics card. A single slot workstation graphics card. But this is not a graphics card. This allows me to add 2 more Gen 5 SSDs on the X8 slot. So it's nice that they include that. So to try to justify the price, they are giving you a lot of extra stuff. And like I said at the beginning of the stream, this is definitely kind of what makes this seem like it's tailor-made for someone who's doing HEDT, like a mini workstation, as opposed to someone who just wants to build a gaming computer. I don't think a lot of gamers are going to want to use something like this. So, but that is one thing that they added. There is also this. This is a fan hub. It not only is it a fan hub, it also has RGB, so it has an RGB hub as well. So I think they have to use one of the proprietary connectors for this, but that is also included. So it's a nice little value add. They call this the Easy Control Hub. So Easy Control Hub. So I may play around with that. And then the Wi-Fi antenna is magnetic. I believe MSI was the last one to do magnetic antennas. So in here, you can see everyone's doing this new connector type, which doesn't require the screwing it on. I don't know, in using these, I kind of think the older design is more reliable. But I guess this is less prone to somebody like ripping the cable out of the back of their motherboard. So you get the antenna, which is this piece, and there's like a bottom base that is magnetic. See, I can stick it to the side of the case. Now obviously it's going to weigh down because it's on a plastic bag. So there's some slippage because of the plastic in between. But it is magnetic, so that's nice that they have that. I might actually leave this over here because I might actually connect this at the end. So the Wi-Fi antenna. And finally here in the accessory box. So this is where all the cables are going to be. So stuff like the SATA cables, you know, all the regular things like the thermal probes. This is a, what is this? This is a RGB extension cable. So you get RGB extension cables. This looks like a front panel extender cable. We might actually have to use this because the Godlike, well, we'll get into it. The Godlike uses an easy bridge. It uses a special kind of proprietary connector that has a bunch of this stuff. So we may have to use this to extend the cables because of where the things are on the motherboard. They're in the placement that is not the standard. More thermal probes, more SATA cables. They give you, okay, so it looks like they give you 4 SATA cables. That's one for every actual port. And then this looks like some sort of, I'm not sure what this is. This is some kind of USB or front panel with RGB on it. So that's an interesting one. I'm not sure what that's for. And then this, okay, this is the SATA. This looks like the 4090 cable. That looks like the 4090 connector. That's a 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. This is a 10 pin. 10 pin. So it's missing the 12. It's a 10 pin, but it looks a lot like the 4090 connector. And then it has 2 SATA. So this is probably SATA power for either the Easy hub. So this is probably for the hub down here, the RGB and the fan hub. SATA powering it. And then this looks like this is ARGB splitter and extension cables. So you get a lot of ARGB cables. So this is definitely going to be tailored to the gamer crowd or someone who just wants to make a very good-looking boutique build. But it has all this like workstation stuff that I need for productivity. So I find this is kind of an interesting product because it has all the gamer RGB bling, but you know it also has the productivity stuff like this add-in card, for example. This is another ARGB to what looks like Corsair's RGB proprietary connector. And then this is a 4-pin fan header to some kind of mini 4-pin. This looks like a weird MSI proprietary connector for something. And then finally there is another, this looks like an extension cable for either for something. Probably, if I had to guess, the front panel headers. And I think that's the last one in there. Okay, then in addition to that, they give you extra thermal pads. These are extra thermal pads. So if you ruin the thermal pads that are already pre-installed on the board, they give you 2 extras. There are some screws. These screws, I would imagine, are for mounting the fan hub to the back of the case. Unless the case, I don't know, is it magnetic or not? I don't know. And then the USB drive with the chipset. It's right there in an ESD bag. So that has the drivers, chipset drivers, Wi-Fi drivers, the Wi-Fi 7 drivers, for example, Bluetooth, etc. All that stuff's in there. All right, and then lastly, we get Lucky the Dragon stickers, MSI stickers, SATA cable labels, European Union regulatory notices, quick installation guide, and a shout out MSI. So that's basically everything that's in the box. Comes with a lot of stuff. A lot of cables. This is a lot of cables. This is a lot. Alright, I'm just going to put this over here. We'll come back to this. Alright, so and it's a really big box too. It's a fancy box. It has really premium gold trim packaging. This almost makes me think of like, I don't know, like the gold Power Ranger or something. Just the design of it. It's interesting. Okay, anyway. On to the main attraction here. Alright. So let me try to get this to line up a little bit better. Okay. Let's take a look at this. Okay, this says, warning, detachable design, please do not lift the motherboard by the dashboard. This is held by adhesive magnets. So that means to pull this out of the box, you don't want to pull from this thing. You want to pull from here, or from here, or the heatsink, or from like probably up here. And it's also like it's dug in at the bottom of this foam. So it's got this kind of ESD foam. So I'm going to ground myself here by adding the metal thing. You guys can't really see that, but we have the metal right there. Okay. You always want to be ESD safe when touching electronics like this that have component lump circuit elements like capacitors, inductors. resistors. You don't want to short anything and damage the hardware. So, okay. And there it is. That is the Godlike. So we can see here, fully toolless. The nice thing about MSI, no screwdriver required to install the M.2 drives. So let's take a look here. So the first one, you press on the tab and it comes up. This is the RGB. There's an actual screen on top of this heatsink. And there you have the first heatsink. This is the connector for the RGB, which will link there to the board. Down there. Pads on both sides. This is a Gen 5 SSD slot. Just like with all AM5 motherboards, the top one is always going to be Gen 5 on these X870E motherboards. Next, we have the middle section. Actually, before we do the middle, so the PCIe slot at the top, this is an X16 Gen 5, and the button for the quick disconnect overlays on top with a detachable design. If you guys watched the unboxing video, I went over this already. But if we press this, that is now in the open position to install a graphics card. When we press it down, now it locks it in place. So you can kind of see this is moving. It's moving. So that is a quick disconnect. That is a very good quality of life feature for anyone who's going to use a large air cooler like the Noctua D15 Gen 2, for example, which is going to like come up to here and block all the RAM and block this and block most of this. So it'll be very hard to get in there traditionally to get the GPU out if you're using a large air cooler. So next we have the middle section. So this large single piece covers 3 additional SSDs. One of them, the top one here, is the second Gen 5 SSD slot. So this top one is Gen 5. This other one is also Gen 5. Now, the thing about this second one, this second Gen 5 SSD slot shares bandwidth with the 2 40 gigabit USB ports at the back of the motherboard. So that means that when you use the USB 4, let's say, for example, you plug in a Thunderbolt 3 AverMedia Live Gamer Bolt capture card, you plug that in back here with a Thunderbolt cable, that is going to use the lane bandwidth that is shared with the second Gen 5 SSD. Now that doesn't mean that you can't use both of them. This is the nice thing about the Godlike. The Godlike and the Tomahawk are the only 2 X870 generation boards, unless MSI comes out with an Ace next year. The Tomahawk from the X870 line and the Godlike from the X870E line are the only 2 motherboards out of all the motherboards for AM5 currently. They're the only 2 that do this unique ability where the second Gen 5 SSD shares bandwidth with the USB 4 ports on the back. They do this to avoid taking lanes from the graphics card. So this motherboard and the Tomahawk are the only 2 motherboards that offer 2 Gen 5 SSDs while maintaining 16 Gen 5 lanes to the graphics card slot. This is a very unique feature, and this is one of the exclusive features that the Godlike and the Tomahawk have over every other motherboard. No other X870E nor X870 board has this ability. So, while also providing the dual 40 gigabit USB-C on the back. See, that is the differentiating factor. That is the upgrade ability versus the previous generation X670E. Whereas those gave you 2 Gen 5 straight up with no lane sharing, but there was no USB 4. Or if there was USB 4, there was some sort of other caveat. So here we maintain the 16 lanes. Now, in addition to that, there are two more Gen 4 SSDs off the chipset. And the nice thing about this is both the top and the bottom of all of the SSD slots have thermal pads. Now, the second slot here, this second one is an X8 Gen 5. And this second slot is meant to be used with the expander card that we just looked at in the box. Now, that uses 8 lanes. However, there aren't enough lanes. You do the math, there's a total of 24 lanes of Gen 5 that connect directly to the chipset. So let's do the math. We have 4 up here. We have 4 right here. That's 8 lanes. This is 16 lanes. 16 plus 8 equals 24 lanes. That's your total lane count. So between these two drives, the USB 4 and this X16 slot, that is maximum bandwidth already. That is already full 16. So the only way the Godlike can offer an X8 Gen 5 on the second slot is to take 8 lanes from the top slot. So if you do use anything, it doesn't matter what it is. It can be like a sound card. It can be an NVMe drive expander card like the one that comes with the Godlike. It could be a second graphics card. As soon as you plug anything in here, the top slot will drop to X8 speed. So be aware of that. Is this the best of the best? Yes, this is the highest end motherboard for AM5. So the Taichi does share lanes. The Taichi's bottom slot, the Taichi and the Godlike do the exact same thing. So the second slot on the Taichi is exactly the same as the Godlike's second slot. Meaning if you plug anything in the second slot on the X870E Taichi, the top slot will also run at X8 speed. I have verified this when we did the live stream build, when we did the content on that board a few months ago. So, okay. Finally, there's a third slot down here. This one is an open X4 slot. Now, this is, to me, an upgrade over the Hero, which is the motherboard that I'm currently using. Because the Hero does not have this X4. The Hero, the Taichi, and the Godlike, all 3 of those motherboards have the dual Gen 5 slots. But as soon as you populate the second slot on the Hero or the Taichi or the Godlike, the top slot will run at X8 speed. However, unlike the Hero and the Taichi, the Godlike also has, check this out, check it out, X4 open slot down here. So the Godlike has an extra 4-lane slot at the very bottom. The Hero does not have this. Neither does the Taichi. So this is where the Godlike tries to justify the premium price, because this X4 slot does not pull lanes from the GPU. So what this means is that I can do 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 5th hidden SSD. We can do 5 SSDs on the Godlike, and the GPU will still run at 16 lanes. 16 lanes on the graphics card while doing 5 full M.2. Now, this X4 slot at the bottom shares bandwidth with the final M.2 drive. So when you use the X4 and this 5th M.2, they will share the bandwidth together. However, I would rather it be like this versus, oh, if you do the M.2, you can't use the X4. Or if you do the X4, you can't do the 5th M.2. All the other motherboard manufacturers, they make you have to make a choice. There's a compromise. It's either or. You cannot do both. Which means, for example, on the gigabyte X870E Aorus Extreme AI top. You have to choose between the bottom slot or your last M.2 drive. You cannot have both active at the same time. There is a priority in the BIOS where it will override one of them. Typically, they will give priority to the PCIe slot, which means if somebody installs on an Aorus Extreme AI top, if they install an SSD, I forget which one has priority, but let's assume for the sake of argument that the PCIe has priority. If somebody has an SSD in their last SSD slot on the Aorus Extreme, and they then plug in something in the bottom slot, their SSD disappears from them. They no longer have access to it. It's shut off until they remove the thing out of the PCIe slot. So it, like I said, it's a compromise. It's you choose one, but you can't have both at the same time. The Godlike is the only X870E motherboard that allows you to have both active at the same time. No compromise. So I would rather it work the way it does on the Godlike versus being forced to choose one or the other. I like having the ability to have both of the devices active at the same time, even if that means they're sharing the bandwidth. Because realistically, the bottom SSD is typically going to be storing like games or, you know, archive footage for editing in DaVinci Resolve or something. You know, like it's going to be some kind of archival drive where it's not really a primary drive, it's more like a storage drive. So I don't really need it to be blazing fast, and it's only a Gen 4 anyway. So it's a happy compromise. So for me, as someone who needs to use this motherboard for productivity, what I'm definitely going to do is the bottom slot is going to have a 4K capture card installed down here, and then at some point I'll probably add another SSD down here. But for right now, I'm probably going to only run 4 SSDs, so I'll be using these 4 here. Does sharing bandwidth mean that they alternate in sending stuff? No, think of it like a hub. Think of it like a hub. I think it'll just burst. It'll just send stuff over the lane. So basically, you can what it's going to translate into is instead of the theoretical maximum of 4 lanes, you can average it for both devices as though they were both operating at 2 lanes. That is the easiest way to think of it. So this bottom slot, if I have both of these populated at the same time, think of it like this is going to run at mostly averaging around X2 lanes. Same thing with this SSD. It's going to be like 2 lanes Gen 4 on average. If you're accessing both at the exact same time and you're actually using them in a way where they are actually filling up the lanes, where they're actually sending data continuously, not like random, oh, I need to read a file. You know, like that's, you're never going to notice a bottleneck there. Are there only the Nova Phantom board who has 5? No, there's more than that. There's actually quite a few. So the motherboards that have 5 M.2 slots, number one, obviously, we're looking at one right here. Godlike, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The Nova, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the Nova. The Asus Hero, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The Strix-E, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there are many boards that have 5 SSDs. It's not just the Nova. The Nova is the only ASRock motherboard that has 5 M.2s. The Hero has the Slim SAS that lets you get that extra PCI X4. Yeah, that's a good point. So the cool thing about the Hero, and I know this because I did a whole video about it, and I'm actually using the Slim SAS in this computer that I'm live streaming on right now. So the Hero can technically do, let me think about that, 6. The Hero can do 6 SSDs, counting the Slim SAS. So the Hero has 5 physical on the board, plus the Slim SAS, so you can do 6 SSDs on the Hero. The Godlike does 7, because the Godlike does 1, 2, 3, 4, 5... 6, 7. So if I populate this, This gives me my 6th and my 7th SSD. So the Godlike one-ups the Hero by like 1 drive. So the Hero does have a lot of storage capability. So that's the reason why I'm using that as a live stream. But there's a lot of caveats with the Hero. For example, for the Hero, the 2nd and 3rd M.2 drives, those share lanes with the X8. So if you're using the 2nd and 3rd drive, you can't use the X8 on the Hero at all. It will be disabled, and there's no way around that. So there are caveats with resource on the Hero that there's compromises that have to be made. With the Godlike, you don't have to do that, meaning I can run all 5 of these drives and I can still use my X8 for an additional 2 more Gen 5 SSDs. So the Godlike does 1, 2, 3, 4 Gen 5 on the Godlike, plus 3 Gen 4, for a total of 7 M.2 drives on the Godlike. So that's why it's able to claim the top dog spot, because it has the most storage and it has the most high-speed storage. The Godlike is replaced. Well, okay, technically, no. The Godlike is replacing my old X670E Aorus Master, so that will free up the Hero, so the Hero doesn't have to be the stream PC anymore. Originally, I wanted the Hero for overclocking. Although technically I could use this for overclocking. You can see now why I would rather use this for productivity versus the Hero, because there's way less compromise with the Godlike. The Godlike, I can do 5 SSDs with no lane sharing. The Hero, I can do 4 SSDs with no lane sharing. And that includes Slim SAS. So if you guys want to know how I have the Hero working, because right now on the Hero, I'm running 4 M.2s, and my graphics card is still running at 16 lanes. So, you know, and I can run, actually I can run a second GPU in there too. So technically, the Hero has a way to work around it, but you're capped at like 4 SSDs. Okay, so let me put this back in here. That is a nice box. That box is like a briefcase. I just opened it up and pulled that SSD card out. Newegg running some deals. Decision between Gigabyte Elite versus MSI Tomahawk. The Elite. The Elite's a higher end board. X870E is the higher end. That's a dual chipset. The Tomahawk is a single chipset. The Tomahawk, though, is pretty fancy because it does do the exact same thing that the Godlike does, where it's giving you like 2 Gen 5 with no lane sharing. The Gigabyte Elite is going to have lane sharing after the second. You can only do like 2 drives on the Gigabyte without lane sharing. So that is something to keep in mind. But technically speaking, from a hierarchy standpoint, the Elite is it's a more featured board than the Tomahawk. Unless you really, really don't want lane sharing. If you're gonna, so let me put it this way, guys, because everybody seems to have this anxiety about lane sharing. If you absolutely want to avoid lane sharing, meaning you always want your GPU, no matter what, you don't want to worry about, oh, can I use the 4th M.2 or the 3rd M.2 and I can still do... If you don't want to worry about that, either buy an ASRock motherboard or buy the Tomahawk, or wait and get the Gigabyte Aorus Extreme. Those are the motherboards, or get the Godlike. But, you know, the Godlike is, like, it's got a Godlike price tag. So that's going to be very prohibitive for a lot of people. I totally understand that. Because I don't know how I'm going to basically... let's put it this way. Because I purchased the Godlike, there aren't going to be any more live stream builds for a pretty long time. Like, this basically maxed out the entire budget for the next, like, 6 months for PC build-related things. So we're going to do a lot of overclocking content and other sort of, like, pre-baked video stuff. Maybe some live stream overclocking content, but we aren't going to be doing any more build videos for a long time. So... yeah, the older boards don't do lane sharing, but their USB 4 is slower than the new USB 4 because they're running on an older USB 4 chipset from Intel. It's actually a Thunderbolt chipset, and it's on Gen 3. So just keep that in mind. There are some things that the older motherboards do better in the sense that with the older motherboards, you don't have to worry about lane sharing, but you are missing out on the latest and greatest stuff. You don't get Wi-Fi 7, although most people on desktop don't really care. And you don't get the better, more reliable USB 4 when it comes to full throughput speed, because the ASMedia is on Gen 4 and it wires directly to the CPU, whereas the USB 4 on the old Hero, that goes through the chipset, so there's potential for bottlenecking going on because there's a bunch of drives and things that also run through that exact same chipset lane. So just keep that in mind. That is one of the differences, though. Technical differences aside, the older motherboards are objectively better in some ways. For the best price, other than the Nova, Tai Chi all the way. Yeah, the Tai Chi is very good. The Tai Chi is going to be the best one. Well, the Tai Chi is the lowest price that gives you the E-clock overclock capability. If you want that from Asus or MSI or Gigabyte, you have to pay $500. So ASRock is like $50 cheaper than everybody else while offering that feature. So let's go ahead and put this back together here. So very, very fancy motherboard. I like that it's fully toolless because I don't have to use a screwdriver to get M.2 drives in. So I am probably going to have to pull the M.2. So obviously, because I'm streaming on the computer that this motherboard is going to replace, I don't have any M.2s right now to put in here. So that's going to come later. But we can still build the computer. It just won't have any boot drive. Okay. The last thing is the easy bridge. So how do I want to do this? So this thing right here on the side, this is held in by magnets. So I'll have to remove this to screw this in to the motherboard or to the case. So I'll show how that works later. It's basically attached by these very strong magnets. There's no screws, there's nothing. I really like that they're going with this toolless design aesthetic now. We're probably going to have to move this out of the way. So for now, I will go ahead and move the board over here, and I'll get it back here later. All right, the case. Let's talk about this case. So this case that we're going to be building in is currently my new favorite case, and this is my personal best case of 2024. This is a brand new case from this year, just like the NZXT H7 Flow that we did earlier this year. People probably look at this case and are like, what is this case? This is a high-end case meant for productivity. This is not meant for gaming. That doesn't mean you can't game on it, though. That ain't no Leanne Lee. Yeah, this ain't no Leanne Lee. Yeah, good. Does anybody know what this case is? Can anybody recognize what this is? It is a giant case. It is a big case. Does anybody know what this is? Does anyone know what this is? That the Cooler Master? This is Cooler Master? You think this is a Cooler Master? Corsair? Somebody got it. RK got it. RK Pro Art. This is the Pro Art case. And it is heavy. This is a really heavy case. This is a full tower. This is a heavy boy. All right. You can see it. There's the grill. Move this over here so I can get this over here for a while. Oh boy, this thing is so heavy. So much metal. Okay. It has these side handles to lift. This is big. It's huge. So, right here it has intake or exhaust cut out in the glass panel. It has these fancy buttons that you press and it comes out like a Lambo. It's got the Lambo doors. I call them the Lambo doors because you can close it You press the button, and it opens up like that. It's like it opens like this. So we can just lift it off, and there you go. The tinted windows. It's got the tinted windows. Lambo doors with tinted windows. So the reason why we're building using this is because this is the only case that I have that can fit the Godlike. The Godlike cannot fit in the Torrent. It cannot fit, well, it might actually be able to fit in the NZXT that we did the build for the 9800X3D. But the reason why I need to use the ProArt is because the Godlike is so wide and the connectors on the Godlike are right angled that I need a lot of space in the front section to fit the 24-pin kit. You guys will see when we build in it. It'll make sense when we start building in it. But this is a big case. This is a huge case. The other thing too, let's show this. So it's got buttons here to detach the front. The front grille. So it actually has the ProArt logo in there somehow. But this grille. So Asus is going to release a wood trim version of this case later this year. They showed it off at CES back in January. It's almost been a whole year and they haven't released it to market yet. But there is going to be a wood trim version of this case that looks really good. I mean, this is definitely like luxurious stuff right here. This is a luxurious case. It has, first of all, at the top, it has a lock button or a lock switch for the power button. So if I lock it and if I press the power button, the computer's not going to turn off. So like if you have a pet cat, for instance, if the cat likes to rest on top of your computer, like it can't just like, its paw can't like step on your power button and send your computer to sleep or send your computer into shutdown mode if it accidentally presses the power button. So there's stuff like that. It has a 20 gigabit USB-C on the front panel that supports the full 60 watt supercharging. So it's got all the transfer speeds for like high speed storage transfer from external media or external storage. And then it has USB 3 type A ports as well. So there's like 4 USB type A. There's a 120 gigabit USB-C. It has a fan override switch controller because this case includes a fan hub on the back. And it also has an IR sensor down here to detect if there's dust buildup on the filter. So if your PC intake gets too full with dust, you'll get a blue little light that pops up here indicating that you need to clean your filter. It even has that. Like that's something that the other cases don't do. But this is my personal favorite case of 2024. When I saw this at CES back in January, I had to get it. The other thing, it's got wheels. It's got casters. It's got wheels on the back. I can roll it. It's got wheels. You can barely see them back there. This thing's got wheels built in. So it's super heavy, so it's easy to like tilt it up and just roll it around. So yeah, it's got wheels. And then the other thing, the front intake, 200 millimeter. 200 millimeter intake fans. And these are really thick. These are thick fans. They're really dense. So it's got the really big fans. Dual 200 millimeter intake. Right here. A dust filter. An IR sensor for the dust buildup. You can do a 420 AIO up here. I don't see why anyone would want to take these out. But technically if you wanted to do liquid cooling in the front, you could do a 420 in the front. You could do a 420 up top. So it's got lots of like radiator compatibility. So it's really good. What else? There was something else I wanted to say about it. Oh yeah, it has a GPU, a really good anti-sag GPU support bracket at the front. We will get into that when we start doing the build. Because the PCIe, maybe this camera can show some of this. Yeah, there we go. You can see the really thick fan. And actually, if I turn this over more, well, I got the cables run here from the previous, but we'll look at the inside. Actually, we'll probably just start doing the build now. Just put it on its side. Hey Douglas, thanks for the sub. Let me see if I can. Where am I going to put? How am I going to angle this so that it's actually going to be able to get what I'm doing? Maybe I'll have to put it in the traditional spot. Well, I guess I can do it. That's actually a good view. Okay. So I've already got my power supply cables run. So I don't know if this helps, but yeah, this might actually help you guys see what's going on in here. So I already have the 360 AIO up top. So I got the deep cool up here. I've pre-run the power supply cables because, you know, this case I've been using it for a while now. So we're just going to put the Godlike in. It's basically a board swap, so it's pretty straightforward. Here is the cold plate for the AIO. But this right here, oh, you can't see it. We'll look at it later. But there's a really good anti-sag bracket. Hey RC, thanks for the super chat. You're going to be running the X4, what? The 4 DIMM? No, it will be 6,000. We'll run it at 6,000. Because the PCIe X4 slot shares bandwidth with the M.2 beside it, if you use NVMe, if you use what? If you use an NVMe to X5 SATA as well as a capture card with a saturated. I don't know what you mean by an X5 SATA. The motherboard has 4 SATA ports that are independent of those lanes. Alright, I need to get all this stuff. I have to get all these fan wires out of the way to make room for the Godlike so it can land in its spot. And these power cables are going to probably get in the way. But this is probably the best case that I've got. So it's worthy of the Godlike. Full backplate on this motherboard, of course. Godlike has a full backplate. Alright, so 1, 2, 3. We're going to just go ahead and put this in. And it's in. Just like that. That's the advantage of having a big case with a lot of open space. Now also, see how wide this is? See how this comes all the way up? Here's where the cutouts for the cables are. I'm going to have to bend all these cables to get them to fit in like this. That is the reason why I had to use my ProArt, because none of my other cases, maybe the NZXT can fit this motherboard. But I'd have to take apart my 9800X 3D system in order to fit it in there, or to see if it would fit in there. Okay, so it does look really good in this case. Just saying, like, just to kind of show you guys. Let me see, let me get more light on here. So, see how that looks? It fits the aesthetic. Obviously, the deep cool fans are kind of like different colored. The ProArt fan has a ProArt logo. It is hilarious putting an MSI Godlike in an Asus ProArt. That just sounds weird. Oh, another nice touch on this. Look, check this out. Foam inserts. It's got foam padding, sound dampening material. This case has sound dampening material so that you don't get vibrations or those rattling noises when the fans are idling and it's resonating. You know what I'm talking about? Like when your computer case has that annoying rattle that can happen. The ProArt is so solid, it even goes so far as to add sound dampening padded material on the side that will touch the glass surface so that you do not get any weird vibration or any kind of noise. It's got noise dampening. Also, these fans are super thick. These are the really, really thick fans. These 200 millimeter fans. And there is the smart filter, the IR sensor for detecting dust buildup on the filter, the intake filter there. So overall, this is a case worthy of the Godlike. Hey RC, thanks again. Would it fit in a 7000D? Most likely, yes. Anything that can fit in here can fit in a 7000D. Will you still have a sticker? The 7000D is actually taller than this case by a little bit. This case is almost as big as the 7000D though. Has a removable motherboard tray. Oh, the Lianli XL. So look at this, guys. The main thing you got to make sure of is this. The motherboard is so wide, and I actually had to remove the ProArt's shroud. So the ProArt, similar to the NZXT, the ProArt comes with this shroud to hide all these cables. But because the Godlike is so big, I had to physically remove this to get it to fit. If this was the Tai Chi or the what's another EATX, like the X670E Hero, or not the Hero, that's too small. The Extreme, the ROG Extreme, that's actually probably the same size as this. So I'm not even sure on that one. The Gigabyte Aorus Master that I have, that is an X670 EATX. That could fit in here. But the Godlike is actually wider than both the Tai Chi and the Master. This is the biggest AM5 motherboard there is. It is just so wide that it forced me to remove the ProArt's shroud. That's how big it is. And this is my largest case. See, check this out. The other thing, too, is this has to go in at a right angle. See, all these cables have to go in right angle. So that means you're going to need a lot of space on this side of your computer case. So you definitely do not want to put this in a regular mid-tower case. Even if your motherboard, or even if your case claims it supports EATX, you need to make sure that it can support like full CEB. Look up cases that support CEB. CEB is like a workstation motherboard. Because this is basically CEB in terms of how big it is. They just don't put that officially because it's not a Threadripper. Okay, so let's screw this in here. I'm going to mount it to the case. So the ProArt's got this little accessory box. Oh, check this out. See that? Most people don't use this. You know what this is? Speaker. A lot of modern cases no longer include the speaker. And I really don't like that they don't include the speaker. And Asus, talking about Asus, another thing that annoyed me about the Hero, which is another reason why I don't want to use it as a live stream PC, is because the Asus motherboard has nowhere to plug in the traditional speaker. And if you guys know me, if you guys have been watching all these live stream builds, you guys notice I listen for the beep. I listen for the beep from this thing to know when it successfully did a post. And I don't like that the Hero from Asus does not let you plug the speaker into their motherboard. In fact, I don't think any of Asus's motherboards support the speaker anymore. And I don't know why Asus removed that feature. It is very bad that they did that. So you don't get beep codes on Asus motherboards anymore. That's another reason why I'm moving away from the Hero. Yes, the 8 had it. But you have to remember, the 8 is a motherboard from 2019. Alright, the Godlike, thankfully, MSI, ASRock, and Gigabyte all fully support the speaker on all their motherboards. So we will definitely be using this right there on the Godlike, which is where it goes. In fact, I'll plug it in right now. JFP2. There we go. Speaker's connected to the Godlike. I'll clean that up later. It's just dangling out there. Okay. We got the post speaker on the Godlike. We're going to need some screws. Why not just build in the speaker on the board? Because Asus is too cheap. That's a good question. I always wondered about that. Older motherboards used to also have a buzzer. A larger one, which is a 2-pin that was closer. This is where I feel like I'm doing like some sort of precision work. Yeah, that's a good point, though. I agree. I wondered that years ago, and then I just kind of gave up on that thought about them putting why don't they integrate the speaker into the board? That's a very good idea. I mean, I thought of it years ago, and I always wondered it, and I gave up. But yeah. Okay, so for this motherboard, I'm gonna have to remove this to get at the middle. We gotta take this thing off because the middle screw hole is right here. So this motherboard does require, unfortunately, it requires removing heat sinks and parts to get to all the motherboard standoffs. And I don't over tighten. I get to it so that it resists me, and I'm only using like 2 fingers. If it resists me, I'm done. You don't want to over tighten these because you don't want to like crack the board, or you don't want to mess up the standoff. The other thing too is if you over torque the standoffs in the future, if you ever are going to do a board swap and you try to undo the standoff, if it's over torqued, you're going to like undo the standoff underneath the board, and it's going to be a real pain to get it out. So just, that's a pro tip right there. I feel like I'm not connecting that one. Oh wait, there we go. It was off-centered. Gotta have the headlamp to see in there. All right, and then the rest of them, I'm gonna have to take this heatsink off. I'm gonna have to take this thing off after this one. Asus does stupid things every generation. Yeah, that is kind of, yeah. Okay, let's do, I can put this back on now. Man, that is so nice. All right, let's do this guy. So for this is held down. Actually, no, let's do the bottom first so that the last 2 are on this. Because when I pull up on this, there could be some flexing on the board because this is held down by some really strong magnets. So I want to get these 2 down here in so that those 2 are the only 2 remaining. For those of you curious what the name of this case is, this case is the 2024 Asus ProArt PA602. PA602 is the model number on this case. Okay, here we go. Moment of truth. I'm going to have to pull this off. There we go. Easy bridge is off. There is the proprietary connector that MSI designed and engineered. And here are some powerful magnets. And magnets down here. And then the CMOS battery is actually down there as well. And you can see where the proprietary connector goes. This will also include the postcode debug on this LCD screen. Oh, also, I guess while I have it off, we can go through here and look at this. So right here, this is, if the camera will focus, this is the front panel connector. So this is the power reset, the hard drive LED, the power plus, power minus. That's JFP1. JFP2, obviously you guys can see it. I plugged the speaker in there. The bridge connector, we would have to get the cable in the box for that. Temperature sensor probes go here. Tuning controller right here. Then it has the Easy Connect. I think this goes to the hub that's also in the box. And then a USB 2.0 header right there for the front panel USB or whatever, your AIO USB or whatever that would plug in right here. So that's what they've got on the bridge. The way I look at the Godlike, I think of this as more of like a concept board. It's kind of like a BTF board when you think about it, because you don't see, other than the two EPS power connectors for the CPU, none of the other power connectors are anywhere on the front side of the board. Everything else is right angle connected on the right hand side of the board. So it does come into problems. Some of the challenges with this board are very similar to BTF boards, where the case compatibility is going to be rather limited. I had to look through my entire case collection. Out of all my cases, only the ProArt, one of my best cases and one of my largest cases, was the only one that was capable of handling the Godlike. So I don't have any sort of BTF compatible motherboards, or cases I should say. So that is something to keep in mind. I feel like props to MSI. Yes, it's a very expensive board, but it's kind of like a concept project that they did. They built this super over-engineered board with all these, you can call them gimmicks, like the bridge, for example. It's kind of a gimmick, but it is kind of an interesting idea. It is an innovative way of trying to effectively do what BTF does and maintain compatibility with these large high-end cases. And the Godlike comes with all this workstation sort of stuff, like the expander card for more M.2s. It's got PCIe slots here. It's got the X8 slot, for instance. So it's got lots of connectivity. 5 M.2. It's got a ton of USB on the back, a bunch of USB-C on the back for that matter. So overall, it is definitely the highest end board. It's just super expensive. I mean, buying this motherboard makes me feel like I just bought a laptop. I bought a laptop without a display and without a CPU. That's what it feels like buying the Godlike. Because a lot of laptops, most people spend around what the Godlike costs to get a decent laptop these days. So, just saying. So, alright, so I'm going to go ahead and connect the 24 pin while I have that bridge off, so I can get a good feel of how this is going to go in, now that I've got all the... Okay, that went in relatively smoothly, but see how it has... I have to bend... I've got to bend this cable here like this. Oh yeah, without RAM. Yeah, without any of the other stuff. Okay, the other thing too, let me kind of bring the camera up closer here if I can, if the cord will allow me to. Alright, so let's look at this. So just like the Tomahawk, it has the button, the quick disconnect button. See? So it has that. Here's the CMOS battery. It's actually like a laptop CMOS battery. It has the little wire. There's the 24 pin. Everything is right angle connected. See? All the USB 3.1, 3.2, the 3.0 is like down here somewhere. There's two of them. So everything on this board is right angled. So you need to have a very wide case. See, even with the board being so wide, I still have to account for the fact that I have to right angle all my cables. So they're all going to come through this grommet cutout here on the chassis. All MSI motherboards have it. Yeah, the quick disconnect. Well, what I meant to say is that the button integrates with the easy bridge, because see, this is the button. When this thing lays on top of that, when you press on this, you're actually actuating the button right here. So let's go ahead and put this back on now that I have all the screws in. It just goes right in based off of the magnet's positioning. So it's perfectly seated now. Everything is in. Okay, that's good. So let's plug these in, the EPS cables for the power supply, or for the CPU. Alright, those went in pretty smoothly. I just want to make sure that it's not going to run into these AIO fans. Okay, and we have to pull these back from behind the board. And then the CPU fan, that is going to go here where it says CPU fan, and then the pump system fan is going to go there. So we'll have to put the CPU in, but that one, I don't know how I'm going to route that. I might have to use an extender. That's going to be a weird fit. So you do have to, this motherboard, building with the Godlike, requires extra planning, because you can't just like, you know, throw it in whatever random case. You got to take into account all this right angled stuff and how wide it is. So it's definitely not a good, this is not a good beginner, like if you're building your very first PC, I don't recommend building with a Godlike. First of all, this is an extremely expensive motherboard, and if you don't know what you're doing and you're not that experienced in building PCs, this is a very, very bad choice for a first-time builder. Okay. Now let's put the CPU in. Here we go, the 9950X. 16-core, 32-thread, out-of-the-box, 5.7 gigahertz Zen 5 architecture. There it is. The 99... Wow, this camera is just not focusing today. Oh well. Okay. To minimize potential for error, you do not want to ever leave the socket uncovered. You do not want the pins to be exposed to the open air for any significant duration. So what I'm going to do, watch how quickly I remove this and put this in, because I don't want any sort of error here. We're trying to decrease the amount of error. So we're going to open that. Sockets in. Sockets open. You line up the arrow. There's two notches, one down here, one up there. The arrow is pointing northwest, so into that corner. You look at it. It goes in. There you go. CPU's in. And this comes off automatically. You do not have to remove this manually. You leave this on and it will naturally pop off once you put the ILM plate cover, or the brace, whatever this thing is, the bracket, over the CPU. So that is a pro tip. You do not need to remove this before you mount the CPU. Okay, that was super easy. All right, now the RAM. you're planning on doing a custom loop on this motherboard, just make sure you have a really big case. 7000D will get the job done though. You need a big case. You need a full tower. If you're doing Godlike with custom loop, you need a full tower. Maybe those aquarium cases. I don't use the aquarium cases. You know what I'm talking about? Those ones that are all glass on the side and stuff. I don't like those cases. I think they're very impractical. I like my airflow like this. I just like the air channel being basic. Alright, let's get this memory in. Okay, this motherboard, it does not have tabs on the bottom for the memory. They're only on the top side. So we're going to want to press this down. Once it clicks, it's in. First kit's going to be on channel A, just like I showed in the video. If I am going to do overclocking, if we're going to go for high speed, we will be using 2 sticks of memory, not 4 sticks. But like I said, we're building a workstation. We're building a high-end desktop for productivity. So I care more about capacity for this build than I care about the actual speed. This has a 10-layer PCB though, which means if you want to push high memory speeds, you totally can do that. This is probably one of the best overclocking motherboards for that reason. Alright, now the channel B memory. Do you know if there is any way to add more SATA? Possibly, there's probably some sort of PCIe card that you can get that can convert PCIe into SATA. What I know about the chipset, so the chipset that AMD is using, this has Gen 3 SATA or Gen 3 PCIe lanes that can also function as SATA lanes. So every single one of the SATA ports on this board could also be PCIe Gen 3. I don't know if that answers the question. I don't know what specific PCIe card you would get to do that. But it's possible. I would assume it's possible. I just don't know what to recommend from an actual product standpoint. Alright, 4 sticks of memory. Who says you can't do 4 sticks of memory on DDR5? I'm about to prove a whole bunch of people wrong. Or actually, no. The Godlike is about to prove a whole bunch of people wrong. Okay. So we got all the RAM. Now I need to mount the... Actually, we need to get all the front panel stuff. We'll do the cooler... Actually, yeah, let's mount the cooler. Let's do that now. Okay, because we're using this, let me make sure something on here. This is going to go like that. So it looks like it has enough clearance. So we have to remove the stock bracket here for the stock AMD cooler. Just like with every AM5 motherboard, this procedure is basically the same thing. What you want to do, these brackets and the screws, and then this, you want to save this in either the motherboard box, and you're going to put that in storage somewhere so you can reference that in the future, or you want to make sure you put all these things in the accessory bag so you don't lose these things, especially the cover and these brackets. Feature keep disappearing in MSI. The what? Alright, I gotta go get the mounting hardware for the deep cool. I don't even know where I put... Oh, it's over here. We got this thing, and these. Originally, I was going to put a Noctua D15 on here, but then I thought, man, that's probably not going to look that good. I won't be able to show off the memory RGB. I won't be able to show off the Dragon or this RGB on this thing. So I was like, yeah, I guess we're going to go liquid cooling for this. Okay. Thermal paste. Where's the thermal paste? Anybody like doing a build for the holiday? Are you guys like buying PC parts over the holidays or something? That's all that's needed. I always put a tiny piece of thermal paste, tiny little blob. Rice grain. Rice grain, you don't even need to spread it. You do not need to spread it. It will automatically spread on its own. Alright, that's on. Now I need to get these things on. That simple. What? All the money, you have to stare at the logo at the top? What? Oh, you want to put an air cooler on it? Wow, this is actually further this way than I thought. Maybe I should have built it the other way, but then I think this would probably, the tubes would probably come up to the glass. Yeah, I don't know. That actually goes way over more than I would have liked it to go. Oh well. It'll be hard to get at this though. I don't over torque this stuff. I never over torque it. I go to the point where 2 fingers and I can't go any further. Okay. And then this thing. Oh, the pump needs to be plugged in. I guess I'll probably have to use like an extension cable on that. Because that looks kind of, this just looks kind of bad like that, which is that cable just goes right across there. Same thing with the deep cool cover. This thing's just going to look really sloppy. Just coming across here. The ARGB goes up there. It is nice though that MSI, the Godlike, has all 3 of them in the same spot, like right up there. This looks kind of, yeah, I don't know the best way to cable manage it. Probably like this for now. I don't know. I'm probably going to have to get a fan extension cable or something. Maybe there's something in the box. One of those accessories are probably meant for doing that. But just to get it up and running, I'm just going to run with it like this. Okay, now I need to get the front panel cable, which is somewhere on the back. Then we got to put a GPU in here. And we're pretty much done. I got all my fans and things plugged in. You ever use PTM on the CPU? I have not. I've never used it. I know what it is though. It's like a pad, right? It's more like a pad as opposed to an actual like liquid compound. Oh boy. This is so big. I can't even reach over here. Okay, what I need to do... I forgot that there's wheels. This does have wheels, so that does make it easier to move it around. I need to get this off. I like that there's no glass on the back. I like they just use a solid steel panel. Okay, but in here, there is an actual Micro Center SATA drive here. This doesn't have Windows on it, though, so it's not going to be able to do anything. It just has, like, some Steam games or something. I think it has Steam games. That way I can move it between the computers more easily than having to mess with M.2s all the time. So I just need to get this stuff routed. In fact, how am I going to have to use that fan hub? Pump system 2, pump system 1. Oh, okay. So I really think they designed the Godlike to make use of the fan hub. But what I'm going to do for now, I'm just going to plug it into System 1. In fact, I really only need this for now, just to get into the BIOS. I need my front panel header, which is JFP1, which we can connect right here. Alright, so that's on the Easy Bridge, and then I want the System Fan 2. I'll just plug that into Pump System 2. There. Yeah, they really want you to use the hub. There's not a lot of fan headers on the board on the side there. I guess I can plug the SATA in. Alright, the SATA's plugged in. What about this USB-C? This is a 20 gigabit USB-C, so you want to make sure you plug it into the one that says 20 gig. Which is this upper one. The challenge with the board, though, is because everything is right-angled. Let me see, does it go... Okay. Okay, so the 20 gig is in the 20 gig, and then the 3.0, USB 3.0, the regular blue one. I have to get this one over here. Alright, that's in. So I got my USB 3.0, the Type A for the front panels in. The 20 gigabit USB-C is plugged in. I got all my fans are plugged in. Front panel, power button, reset button, that's all plugged in. Oh, the front audio. What is this? There's a USB. Where's the front audio? Huh, that one's an interesting one. I don't know where that is. That's probably down here. Oh yeah, that's at the very bottom. Okay. Is that on like a cable tie? Yeah. The Asus Apex what? Definitely a different style of building a PC. I've never had to build a computer like this where everything goes in on the front panel or on the side of the front. I guess I'll have this come through here and go underneath this stuff. Actually, we'll go underneath everything. So this is at the very bottom. There we go, that's better. Yeah, this is definitely not a motherboard for beginners. This is definitely for more like industry veterans because you have to like, you're doing stuff like all at the front of the case. You're doing nothing at the back. Alright, the USB, this one I think is up here. Yeah, there's a USB up there. I gotta send this up. This needs to come out of here. Oh, you guys probably not able to even see what's going on. Well, this is the cable management section here. You guys will see I'm like routing things through. Okay, there's a USB 2 right up here. Okay, that's everything. Front, all the USB on the front, the 2.0, the 3.0, the Type-C, 20 gig, all that's in. The random SATA drive is in. The front audio, the front panel, everything's in. Alright, we got everything in now. I think, let me make sure. Nothing needs SATA power. Okay, so that's everything. So let's now go back to the front. I can close this. Yeah, everything's right angled. That's why you need a really big case. This is going to require a very large case. No average mid-tower is going to support this Godlike. Okay. So now you guys can see, let's see, detachable thing. I can peel this off. I'll probably just leave it on for now. Once I manage all where these cables are going to end up, I'll probably redo that. Just don't want anything in the way. All right, graphics card time. Okay. It'll be your first AMD CPU motherboard. Real. Oop. I hit the fan at the top of the ceiling there. Didn't realize how long this is. Really, building an AMD and building an Intel are basically the same thing. There's really no difference. Especially now, since both of them are using LGA sockets. All right. Sapphire Nitro. This is a 4-slot card that uses 3 8-pins. It's very large. I have had this 7900 XTX since March of last year. So I've had it for about a year and a half now. A little more than a year and a half. It has never let me down. This was the Tech Thursdays GPU for that entire duration. Oh, this is actually toolless here as well. Sapphire is my favorite brand when it comes to graphics cards. Out of all the AMD, Sapphire is my favorite. My very first graphics card ever was a Sapphire. It was a ATI Radeon Sapphire X850 XT. That's the very first graphics card. I still have it somewhere. Alright, this is going to need a triple, so I'm going to actually have to undo the last one, this third one here. This does use 3 fingers. I call it 3 fingers. So this is a Frenzied Flame ending GPU. For those that understand that Elden Ring reference, congratulations. So this is a triple finger. I call these things on the back of the GPU the fingers. This is a 3-finger graphics card. Dual DisplayPort and dual HDMI. Oh yeah, we need to make sure this is in the open position. The other thing I want to make sure of is that, okay. Okay, that is in. So I'm going to lock it. Or did it already lock? Oh, it automatically locks. Okay, I didn't know that. So MSI's GPU quick disconnect, the spring load is automatically intelligent enough so when it's in the open position, when you push the GPU in, it'll automatically go into the locked position. It's already in the locked position. So when I try to wiggle the card, it doesn't come out. So it's in there all the way. All right, then this case features a toolless mechanism to lock the GPU into the slot at the back, but only for the first, second, and third PCIe slots. This is an 8-slot case, which means this is technically a full tower compatible ATX case. The way you can tell if it's a true full tower, it has 8 slots at the back. In this case, the Sapphire is a triple slot GPU, which means it uses the second, third, and fourth slot out of the 8 slots available. The top one, nothing's there, and the other ones down here are not used. The 5th and the 6th are used for the second and the third PCIe slot for the Godlike. I am going to have to go and get the third. Yeah, I just realized I'm going to need a third PCIe plug. So we are going to have to go again underneath here and route that through. Okay. Now, where is it down here? Where did I put that cable? Is it all the way at the back? Yeah, it's all the way at the back. Okay, the easiest thing to do is to remove the shroud. There's going to be one screw for the front cover. Why is this thing down here? Okay, so this comes off. That reveals the hard drive sleds at the front of the case. And then there are 2 screws here and one at the back that holds the power supply shroud in place. Okay. Because I already ran these, I don't want them to go out of this, so I'm going to do, what I'll do here is leave them like that. Keep them through here. I don't want them getting like back in there. I just need to route the last one. So now you guys can see all the super flower cables and stuff. So here is this one. This is what I was looking for. The third one of these. I'm going to send all three of them through here. And then we're going to route this like this. And have it go back over everything. What is this? Oh, that's this one? Okay. Okay. What I'll do, before I tighten this back in, I'm going to put all the GPU cables in. Feed that back in there to do cable management. Okay. Okay, I like the super flower cables. The cables are pretty nice. They're not like super hard to bend or anything. They're not extremely stiff. I still think Seasonics are smoother though. In terms of like who's easier to physically plug the cables in, I think Seasonic has a smoother connector. CWT is similar to this. Although some of those Corsair power supplies that are CWT have the capacitors in line with the cable, and those can kind of be annoying. Why is there an extra screw here? Yeah, there's an extra screw. One of them is for this. 1, 2. That is different from the case one, so I'm not going to really worry about that right now. Unless it goes to this thing. No. I'm not sure what that extra screw is for. There's a random screw just like laying down there on the table. Oh well, we'll find out what's wrong with it later, if it actually has anything to do with this build. Okay. All of that's in. Now, the last thing, this case features a very nice anti-sag GPU support bracket. So I wanted to put that on here. I'm going to put that, move that into its spot, tighten it up, and there we go. Make sure it's not interfering with the fan. And that's it. Whoops. Okay. Done. Now we can turn this on. I don't know what the screw is for though. That's a little concerning that there's a random screw that I'm not sure what it's for. It doesn't look like it's a standoff screw. Oh, I know what it's for. It's for the GPU. It's this one. Because the toolless thing only gets the 2 fingers. The third finger I had to actually remove. There we go. Okay. Alright, so everything's accounted for. AIO is installed, pump headers in, fan headers are in, everything's in. Alright, we are good to turn this thing on. So what I'll do, close the back. How long have we been streaming? 2 hours. Wow. And I will put this here to get a better view of it. I want to try to get the debug. Okay. So many boxes on the floor right now. All right, I'm gonna put the front thing back in. Can you move the chat away? Why do I need to move the chat? The chat's not covering up the build. It shouldn't be. Is it in the way? Just make this larger. Okay. Gotta plug in the keyboard and mouse and the monitor, and then we're ready to go. Okay, I have that. Where's the power cord? And the HDMI. I need HDMI, and I need the power cord. And then HDMI. Okay. We have power. No, we don't. Now we do. Okay. How should I do this? Let me turn the lights on the front off so that we can get a better view of this. Here. That way we get a better view. I'll remove the plastic. No, I'm not going to remove the plastic yet because I haven't really done the cable management on here. Alright, it's on. Okay, right there, code 15. You can see... Where's my finger? Man, my finger has to go like way... Okay, right there. Almost. There, right there. Code 15. Memory training. We got code 15 memory training. But yeah, that's basically it. You can see all the stuff. It's showing the RPM, the fan RPM, the pump RPM. The pump is spinning at 3,100 RPM. The CPU voltage is 1.2 volts. The fan RPM is like 1,100 or something. Alright, I see the postcodes progressing. Code 52, it's going in. It's going to post soon. The AIO is indeed nuts. Sapphire's got the nice RGB too. It's got that RGB bar as well. This tripod is kind of defective actually. It's like broken. But oh well. If it'll actually, there we go. The other thing too is I do have the splitter, the capture cards connected. Oh, where is the capture card on here? There it is. Okay, it's up. I just saw it a second ago. Oh, it's coming up, yeah. Here we go. Now, MSI's default is to mute the post beeps. I don't know why they do that. So let's get into the BIOS. All right, we're in. Here we go. We're in, guys. Mission succeeded. Or mission accomplished, whatever. There we go. The Godlike. We're in. Why did it automatically select something even though I didn't press anything? That's weird. Okay. So there we go. We're in. And we can see here. Ooh, let's make this a little bit smaller, or let's move this back over here. Why is it like this? I don't know why it's like that, but anyway. There. Yeah, the fans are loud because I haven't set the fan profile. Oh, is it getting it? Because the mic is literally like right next to the front intake. Okay, let's fix the fan profile, I guess. Okay, here we go. AMD Ryzen 9 9950X 16 core 4.3 gigahertz base. Here's the memory. We got all 4 sticks, A1, A2, B1, B2. Let me here do this first. Disable this. F7. What is this? F7. So we got a Micro Center SATA SSD at 2 terabyte. That's like the only drive that's plugged in. 96 gigabytes of RAM running at 3600. So I want to go to, first of all, MSI driver installer, disable that. And then overclocking. Actually, no, let's do the fan. Fix the fans. Where's the fan profile? Performance preset? No. Hardware monitor? It's probably this. Yeah, there we go. Okay, the fan. Smart fan on this PWM. Pump is whatever. Is there like a preset for silent mode? Smart fan? Here we go. Why is it like that? It only needs to be at like 95 for 100%. There we go. Now it's quiet. This one, that's already smart fan. This doesn't need to be smart fan. Okay, I fixed the fans. Alright, now let me fix the memory. Like, why we need to overclock the memory. Alright, first things first, this does feature the asynchronous E-clock. So you can do CPU base clock overclocking with this motherboard. If that wasn't already known, for those of you that are curious. We're not going to be doing that for right now. And then this is where you would load your Expo or XMP profile. We are not going to do that because we are running 4 sticks of memory. For 4 sticks of memory, we're going to manually set this to 6000 to ensure that it will work. F clock, I'm going to set this manually to 2 gigahertz. Because we're gonna be in Gear 1 mode, where we want this to be 1/3 of 6000, so that would be 2 gigahertz. This needs to stay auto. Memory context restore auto. So as you can see, it's very similar to what was shown with the Tomahawk. This looks a lot like the Tomahawk. which key are you using to get to the BIOS? The delete key. Delete key or F2 or F1. It depends on... So in this case, because this is the very first time booting up, I didn't have to do anything. It goes to the BIOS regardless. But normally you would use the delete key, or typically it would be F1 or F2. It depends on the motherboard. Usually it's the delete key always works though. All right, SoC. We're gonna go to I guess, why is there two different ones? Okay, just like with the Tomahawk, we're gonna do 1.2 on SoC. That's all we need for what we're doing. And then the DRAM voltage, 1.35 volts, and it'll automatically do VDDQ at 1.35 volts. VDDIO also is 1.3 volts. Now, I need to get this kit of memory. Just like, so basically what I'm doing, guys, is I am following my own advice that I did in the recent video on how to do 4 sticks of DDR5. So I'm going through the exact same steps that I showed in the video, only instead of using a Gigabyte motherboard, we're using an MSI motherboard. So we're going to go through the exact same steps here. So now we're going to go into the DRAM timings, wherever that is. Advanced DRAM. Alright, and then cast latency, 32, 38 for this one, 38, 38, and for TRAS, 96. These are my magic numbers. And where am I getting these numbers? The free memory from Micro Center's bundle. The Flare X kit that Micro Center gives you for free when you buy an AMD bundle. I got this from the bundle. When I purchased my 9700X, I got the free memory, and this gives me the profile. So I use this as a reference or extra memory if I need to in an emergency. So it's like spare memory. This is like a spare tire. All right, so the primary timings on this are what you guys see on the screen. 32, 38, 38, 96. That is for DDR5 6000. I'm manually setting them. And the voltage for this memory kit is 1.35 volts. So we don't need more than that. Okay, F10. Go. Oh, I forgot to tell MSI to turn on the beep. I didn't set the beep. One thing I don't like about the MSI BIOS, so see there's the code 15. So we're doing our memory training. Right here you can see code 15. There you go, there's that postcode. You gotta have the debug. For some reason, MSI's default is to keep the beep muted. I don't like how they do that. But at least they give you the option, though. Because this is 4 sticks of memory, it's going to take a while. But I can see it's progressing. You can see it's progressed past code 15, and the numbers are changing. That's a good sign. 99. Here we go. We're coming in. We're coming in at 6,000. So we're going to go straight into the BIOS. MSI. Enthusiastic Gaming. There we go. In the BIOS. And there we have it. 96 gigabytes at 6,000 megatransfers. There we go. Now I want to turn the beep on. So go to boot. Post beep. Why does MSI disable this? I have no idea. We're going to set that to enabled. And save that. So I want to hear the beep. I want to hear the noise of the Godlike. Alright, if anyone has any questions, now will be the time to ask them. Since we're done with the build. Can I do this with 128 gigabytes? Yes, but it will be more challenging and it'll take longer to train. But it can work. You do need a good motherboard though. I will be testing 128. I'll be testing 192 on the Godlike in future content, so don't worry about that. We will be covering that on this channel. I know there's a lot of people asking about 192 and 128, so we will cover that on this motherboard specifically. You got 6000 CL30, G-Skills Z5 Neo. Yeah, see, if I had Neos, I would be doing the same thing. You can run at 2200 mega. What's 2200? You should try to keep it at 1/3 of 6000 if you're running at 6000. You don't need to change the F clock. There we go. I heard the beep. Beep. We're in. Alright, this is to my liking. This is how I kind of want this to be set up. So everything is set up. The nice thing about it, you can see Godlike. Here's the BIOS version. System temperature. So one thing I will say about MSI though, compared to ASRock, Asus, and Gigabyte, MSI does tend to run the CPU at a relatively high idle voltage. This is a relatively high temperature for the CPU, considering the fact that we're on a 360 AIO. Now, that's not a big deal, but it is pegging the CPU at a relatively high voltage in the BIOS compared to what a Gigabyte or an ASRock does, for example. So that is one thing that I have noticed that is different with MSI compared to the others. In terms of the overclocking, for those of you that are looking for overclocking, there is a search option up here, so you can do that as well. If you want to flash the BIOS to the latest version, I believe I'm already on the latest version. The latest is 1A15 right here. This is the latest BIOS, so I don't need to update the BIOS, but typically, if you want to update the BIOS from within the BIOS itself, you would go to M-Flash up here, and you would have a USB drive plugged in with the new BIOS file already ready to go. So that's how you do a BIOS update. Let's go to overclocking. So like I said earlier, there's expert mode and normal mode. The Godlike defaults to expert mode. And then in here, advanced CPU configuration. AMD overclocking. Here is the precision boost overdrive options. So we have core control, we have SMT controls. If you want to turn off simultaneous multi-threading, so for example, if you want to increase your single thread performance to get better gaming performance for the games that do not scale well with hyper-threading or SMT, you can come in here and you can disable it. What this means is that instead of having a 16-core, 32-thread, you'll have a 16-core, 16-thread. So it basically turns the CPU into an Intel Core Ultra, because Intel Core Ultra does not have SMT. So Intel always has it disabled on their new CPU, and there is no way to turn it on, because they got rid of it. All right, LN2 mode, we're not going to do that. That is liquid nitrogen, for those that don't know what that means. We are only going to ever do that if we're going to be doing extreme overclocking with at least dry ice, but most likely liquid helium or liquid nitrogen. So that is for the XOC crowd. But what I want to go in here is the Precision Boost Overdrive menu. Here we go. So this is where you would go to do the overclocking, just like with the Tai Chi, the Hero, the Tomahawk, all the motherboards that I have featured on the channel over the last few months. This is the exact same menu. So in here, we would go to, wow, they've got a lot of presets in here. They got a lot. But we want to go to the very bottom where it says Advanced, and then here we go. Here is where you will gain access to Curve Optimizer, and if you're on a Ryzen 9000 series, you also gain the Curve Shaper feature. So this is where these are. So just like with the other motherboards that we looked at, this one looks basically identical to the Tomahawk. It has MSI's new BIOS. So here is where you can change to the unlimited power, which is basically like, if you guys remember the Intel 13th gen, how it was destroying itself with too much voltage, that is the unlimited power mode. On the AMD motherboard, that is called motherboard limit. So if you don't like the idea of unlimited power, where basically if I say motherboard, this means that the limits are going to be based off of the VRM. And we all know the Godlike has an insane VRM. So that is essentially unlimited power for the CPU. But anyway, for normal people, you're probably going to want to leave this on auto. However, you will get much better multi-thread performance by changing this over to motherboard. Just do note that the CPU will run much hotter under full load. Precision boost, overdrive, scalar control. If we set this to manual, this is the same exact thing. The multiplier, scalar, overdrive, multiplier. This basically tells the CPU to boost more aggressively and in longer durations. So if you're not comfortable with the CPU running hotter and running under higher voltages, you don't need to mess with this. But typically, if you're on a 360 AIO or a 420 AIO, you can easily set this to 5x, and it's going to just give you better performance. This does need to be combined with the boost clock override, which is where you go to increase the maximum frequency that the CPU is allowed to do. Now, in the case of the 9950X, because this CPU is AMD's current flagship CPU, this one has a maximum boost of 5.7 gigahertz. So what that means is if we go in here and we set this to enabled positive, we can increase this in 25 megahertz intervals up to a maximum of 200 megahertz. If I try to put 999 or some big number, like let's do, say for instance, 500, it won't do it. So 200 is going to be the maximum allowed. So if it's 5.7, that means this tells the CPU your new maximum is 5.9 gigahertz. Okay, and then this is for the integrated graphics. Here's curve optimizer, so we can do, oh nice, so MSI has per CCD. For some reason, on the Asus BIOS for the X870E, Asus is missing the per CCD feature on their BIOS. I think they'll add it back, but for some reason it's missing on the latest Hero BIOS from Asus. So per CCD, it's nice that that's there, because typically your faster one is going to be CCD 0, your slower one is going to be CCD 1, so you can tune them independently of each other, or you can do all of them, or you can go very granular and tune every single individual core for a total of 16 cores. So it just depends on how you want to do that, if you want to use Curve Optimizer for better performance. And then lastly, Curve Shaper is the new feature. This is exclusive currently to these new Ryzen 9000 series CPUs. So the 9800X3D and all the 9000 CPUs, they all have this feature. This is not available on the 7000 series CPUs. So anyway, this is actually one of the most useful overclocking features for getting the best single thread performance. Basically, I have like 2 videos on this subject already, and we've gone over this in our other live stream builds. But basically, you have 5 frequency regions. So minimum, low, medium, high, and maximum. So those are the 5. And then within every single 5 range, you have 3 temperature ranges. Low, which is around 0 degrees Celsius, medium, which is around 50 degrees Celsius, and high, which is around 80 degrees Celsius. So just keep that in mind. So if, for example, we want to increase the gaming performance is in the high frequency range, and the CPU typically runs in the medium temperature. So we will do enabled, and we will do a negative or positive, but in this case we'll do a negative, say 10, and this will give us slightly better gaming performance. Now, you also want to do this for high temperature. If you have poor cooling, for example, you can also undervolt the 80 degrees Celsius to 90 degrees Celsius, or 90 plus range. So that's basically how you use Curve Shaper to get better gaming performance. To get better Cinebench scores, you would modify the medium frequency range, because this is typically the all core. So each of these correspond to a range. Medium frequency means 4.5 gigahertz to 5 gigahertz. High frequency range means 5 gigahertz to 5.5 gigahertz. When you play a game on a Zen 5 CPU, typically the frequency is going to be in the 5 to 5.5 gigahertz region, which means it's going to run in the high frequency region, which is the reason why if you want to improve gaming performance, you would modify the high frequency range. Cinebench, the CPU, or multi-thread, like DaVinci Resolve, Blender, productivity stuff, rendering videos, for example, that is going to fully load the CPU. So the CPU pulls back under load where it falls below 5 gigahertz. So that way you would want to adjust the medium frequency high temperature. And you probably want to undervolt here, so we can do like 15, for example. So this gives you guys an idea of how to use Curve Shaper to get better performance using overclocking. So we have overclocked the CPU to 5.9 gigahertz, and we have also introduced an undervolt for our all-core load and our lightly threaded load, or our 5 gigahertz to 5.5 gigahertz range. We can also adjust the maximum frequency as well. What I would do here is under high temperature, or we would do, say, medium, I would do positive 5. I would overvolt so that it has extra voltage to hit 5.9 under light load on my maximum frequency under 50 degrees Celsius range. You can also do this for low temperature, although typically it'll never do that. So there, this gives you guys an idea of what an overclock looks like on a modern Zen 5 CPU. These same settings can be applied to the 9800X3D as well. Okay, so there we go. We have basically, I'm going to save this. So save, yes, we're going to save the overclock because this is a high-end computer and the Godlike can handle it and the CPU can handle it. So we're going to go ahead and apply the overclock so we can get the even better performance. LN2. Those settings allow the CPU to boost to 5.9 gigahertz and improve the thermal characteristics. Basically less voltage in the ranges that I want for gaming, so it can spike to higher frequencies at lower temperatures. That's effectively what I've done. Do you think the motherboard heatsinks will be enough to keep a Gen 5? That's a great question. I think they're not good enough. To be brutally honest, I do not think the Godlike's heatsinks are good enough for Gen 5 cooling. I think that they'll be okay, but they're going to run hot, like 60 degrees plus at idle. I will be testing it though, so I'll let you know. Okay, so it applied the overclock. That's basically it. We've overclocked it now. Let me go back to easy mode here. How do you get to easy mode? Okay, the other cool thing about MSI, MSI is the only vendor that has the ability to change the neural processing unit on a CPU that has an NPU. So for example, a month or two ago, when we were looking at the Tomahawk, I was using the 8700G. The 8700G has an NPU. It has an AI chip. And I was able to change this on that APU. Now, because the 9950X does not have an NPU, this is grayed out. How should we go with this? You can do the exact same thing on the 9800X3D. But you guys can see we're running 4 sticks of RAM. We're running 4 sticks of DDR5 at 6,000. We have the overclock applied. Technically, we've overclocked the RAM by a lot because the default speed, the max supported speed for this configuration of RAM is 3,600 megatransfers. So we have overclocked the CPU to 5.9 gigahertz, and we have also overclocked the RAM from 3,600 all the way to 6,000. This is a massive overclock on the RAM. But because the Godlike is a 10-layer server-grade PCB, it is such high quality that it can handle all the RAM no problem. This is definitely the best motherboard that I have for AM5. When do we utilize the drivers for the motherboard? Once you're in Windows. You do that once you're in Windows. Yes, it supports CUDIM, but currently only in bypass mode. MSI is actually the only vendor that supports CUDIM right now on AMD. Like literally the only one. Meaning if I install CUDIM, if I put CUDIM in there, it will work on this board. Now it's not really going to make much of a difference, but it'll work. $8,000 4 sticks won't work. It's too noisy. It won't work. Now, it'll work on 2 sticks on this board easily. This motherboard can do 8400 or better. This motherboard is a 10-layer PCB. It's insane. This motherboard is the highest end AM5 board. No other AMD motherboard, no other AM5 motherboard, I should say, has this many layers. This is 10 layers. Can't run Cinebench because I don't have an M.2 with Windows. I'm going to have to decom. Basically, guys, what's going to happen here is the computer that I'm streaming on right now, I'm going to take all the SSDs out of it, and I'm going to put them in the Godlike. So I will start using this motherboard for Tech Thursdays. This PC, this motherboard that we just built, this whole build is going to be my new live stream computer. How do you run Cinebench without an operating system? Explain that to me. When I picked up my X870E Carbon, it felt so heavy. Yeah. Yeah, these boards are heavy. My ProArt 670E creator won't boot a 9800X3D with 2 that are the... No, it'll work. Are you on the latest BIOS? You need to be on a BIOS that supports that CPU. X670E will not automatically work with the newer CPUs. Only the X870 will automatically boot the 9000 series. You have to be on a new BIOS. You have to be on at least a GISA 1170. Otherwise, it will not detect your CPU at all. This is pretty much the flagship board. I was trying to wait for the Ace, but I got tired of waiting on MSI. And the thing is, there's only been rumors about the Ace. I don't even know if it's actually going to come to market. Here, let me move this out of the way. Or put this down here, I guess. Or make this a little bit smaller since we don't really need it anymore. Actually, you know what? I'm covering up the computer. I want to show the other angle of the computer. Make this smaller? Why does it do... Okay. I'll just do it like that, whatever. we're not really going to do much more with the BIOS. So yeah, the what? No, the Tomahawk can handle above 5600. The Tomahawk couldn't do 8400 for me. I wasn't able to get that 8400 kit working on the Tomahawk. Yeah, this is a super high-end board. So, I'm basically good now for the remainder of the AM5 socket. I can basically keep updating the BIOS on the Godlike. So, for example, if the 9950X3D comes out, I can swap that in here as soon as that comes out. And then when Zen 6 comes out, I can put that in here. Just update the BIOS and throw it in here. So the Godlike is so high-end. This is a 10-layer PCB. I think a lot of people probably don't understand what a 10-layer PCB even means. It means that the signal integrity is so crystal clear and way less noisier than a lower end motherboard. Like a lower layer count board. Like for example, the average good high-end board will use the Hero. The Asus Crosshair Hero is an 8-layer PCB board. The ASRock Tai Chi is another 8-layer PCB. The Nova is 8 layers. The Carbon from MSI is 8 layers. The Tomahawk is 8 layers. The Gigabyte Aorus Master, 8 layers. This Godlike is 10 layers. This is what it means to go beyond. This is to go into beyond territory. This is basically Super Saiyan 3. 10 layers. This is a server grade PCB. Meaning this motherboard is basically capable of rivaling the Threadripper motherboards. No, I'm just saying, like, that's what it is. I want to clarify what that is for people that don't know what that is. There are a lot of people that are probably not even aware of the differences in the motherboards. You know what I mean? Like, for example, the Gigabyte. So most of the Gigabyte boards are only 6-layer PCBs. All those, like, budget low-end boards, like the Eagle, the Gaming X, you know, those low-end boards, those entry-level boards, those are only 6-layer PCB. Those aren't even 8-layer PCB. So just keep that in mind when you're shopping around. I recommend for you guys 8-layer PCB. Most people will be totally fine with an 8-layer PCB motherboard. Is this motherboard better than its... yeah, that's a great question. The X670E Godlike, the X670E Godlike is technically the only problem with the X670E Godlike. It doesn't give you tangible benefits for its asking price, whereas this motherboard actually does. This motherboard has USB 4. It has 5 M.2 slots. It has an expander card. It has all this stuff. The previous generation Godlike only had the expander card. It did not have USB 4. In fact, there was no way to even add USB 4 to that board. You couldn't even buy like an add-in card and add it if you wanted it. And it didn't have the proper... Like, it was basically the Ace, except it was way more expensive than the Ace. This motherboard, unlike the Ace, this one actually gives you things that you don't have on the Ace. Whereas the previous Godlike did not. So the previous Godlike, for me, that was a hard pass. Because it didn't offer anything to me that I could utilize beyond what I was already doing with the Aorus Master. Hero versus Ace, if Ace comes out. Yes, if the Ace does come out, the Hero will be the rival. And so will the Extreme AI Top from Gigabyte. Those are the rivals. So you've got 3 $700 options. You've got the Asus Hero, you have the MSI Ace, and you have the Gigabyte Aorus Extreme. Those are the 3 boards that rival each other. The MSI Godlike is the only one that's just kind of like off by itself. Technically, if Asus wanted to compete with MSI, they could make an ROG Extreme. A Crosshair Extreme is Asus's $1,000 motherboard, and I don't understand why Asus didn't make one. I feel like that is a missed opportunity from Asus. Maybe they will make one for the 9950X 3D launch, for example, but Asus could rival the Godlike. If Asus made an ROG Extreme, it would rival the Godlike. Does it have an RGB Wi-Fi? Great question. It does not have an RGB Wi-Fi antenna. It does not have an RGB Wi-Fi antenna. It has a plain Wi-Fi antenna. It's got the bland Wi-Fi antenna. No RGB on the antenna. How do you like this BIOS versus the others? That's a good question. I personally prefer ASRock more than this out of the newer ones. Gigabyte updated theirs a year ago. Asus has been using the same BIOS for like 6 or 7 years. But the thing is with Asus, a lot of people are hating on Asus these days. To Asus's credit, Asus made a really good BIOS a long time ago, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It's that simple. There's nothing wrong with the UI for the Asus BIOS. So Asus is very familiar. It's basically time-tested. It's great. I mean, it's the only one that hasn't really changed, though. Gigabyte updated theirs a year ago. MSI updated theirs with X870. And ASRock, I think ASRock updated theirs like 2 years ago or 3 years ago or something. ASRock's actually is quite good, though. In terms of like the layout and the explanation and the folder directories and the trees and stuff, I really think ASRock is probably the most friendly for people that are not experienced building a computer. I honestly feel like ASRock's is actually the best one. How many chassis fan headers does this board have? It only has like 3 or 4. And they're all right angled up here at the front. From what I could tell, there were no fan headers on the back side, like on the right hand side over here. There's like no fan headers down here. This motherboard is basically a BTF motherboard, but instead of having the connectors on the back, they're all on the side. So this is basically like new territory for me. I've never built a PC that has like no connectors on the motherboard, like on the front of the motherboard. Everything I plugged in is on the right angle connectors. So this is a very modern motherboard in that regard. So I like what MSI is doing because it shows that they're trying something new. They're trying to do something innovative with this motherboard. Like I said earlier, the Godlike, to me, unlike the previous Godlike, this Godlike feels very experimental. It feels like MSI is trying something. They've got this fancy connector that has these magnets that hold it to the motherboard. Like, they're doing full toolless M.2. It's a very clean aesthetic. If you want the full lowdown on the board, go watch the unboxing video that I uploaded on the channel that goes through all the functionality that it comes with. But yeah, it's a great motherboard, but it is like, it's basically early adopter. You're paying early adopter fees, essentially, to buy a product that is more of like a concept car than an actual vehicle that is like that people are going to be familiar with building. I will tell you guys this, as someone who has built lots of PCs, this one was definitely one of the more challenging ones for me to put together because I was not used to everything being right angle connector. Like everything was right angled. Like nothing, I plugged nothing in the board. So that felt kind of weird to me. And on top of that, I was blindsided by that, and I had to get my really, really big ProArt case, because this is the only case that I have that can reliably fit not only the board, but also have enough space at the front to plug all the right angle connectors in. This is the Deepcool LT720 360 AIO. toolless GPU on the ASRock gets in the way of the GPU sag bracket that mounts to the board mounts. Well, I don't know what anti-sag bracket you're using, but it sounds like you'd have to use a different one. See, the problem with anti-sag brackets is there's no industry standard on them. So it's going to be very use case specific. Would it fit in the Pantech NV? I don't know. I'm not familiar with that case, unfortunately, so I can't really give you a good answer on that. This does look good, though. Let me see if I can show you guys. Let's see if I can get this camera here and kind of do one last take on this. Just to give you guys the full look at the board. There's the Dragon. There's the Deep Cool. There's all the RAM in all its glory. All 4 sticks look so good compared to just 2 sticks of RAM. Then we have this thing. I haven't peeled that cover off. It's saying boot error. That's because there's no Windows SSD installed. And then this is the Gen 5 heatsink, which I don't think is adequate for an actual Gen 5 SSD. Then we have the Sapphire Radeon. This actually says, if the camera can actually focus on it. Okay, I guess there's like too much light. It says Radeon, but it's really not. Oh, there we go. Radeon. Team Red. The Radeon RGB bar on the Sapphire Nitro. So you got that in there. And then I think there's RGB. There we go. Godlike. It's hidden under the GPU. But you can see there's the Godlike logo. And this thing just fell off. I have to get a new tripod. This thing's cracked. Anyway. Anyway, that is pretty much it. How did I get it to show the... Oh, well. There we go. There we go. That is the final PC build of 2024. We did a whole bunch of builds, including the Intel build. We did an Intel build with a Core Ultra and an Asus Maximus Hero. We did the AMD Hero, the AMD Tomahawk, the AMD Tai Chi. We did like 2 different Tai Chi builds. One was including the 9800X3D. So I guess the only vendor that I have not featured on a live stream is Gigabyte. So I probably, at some point in the future, maybe next year, we'll take a look at a Gigabyte motherboard. Maybe the Aorus Extreme AI Top. Who knows? That is a very nice looking motherboard. And that has no GPU lane sharing with the SSDs. Just another good choice for those of you that want to avoid GPU lane sharing. Yeah, and I haven't even peeled off the plastic. I'm not going to peel off the plastic until I have all my cable management, because I don't want any dust, I don't want any fingerprints, I don't want any like specks or anything, or micro scratches from like random cables rubbing against the glass. So yeah, I won't peel off the plastic until I got all my SSDs ready to go. I got everything set up for the Tech Thursdays build. So we'll have to do that off stream, all the cable management. I just wanted to build this, show you guys what a workstation. This isn't a true workstation. I call this a mini workstation because if a true workstation would be Threadripper, if we're being honest about PCIe connectivity. But for most people, if you're going to build a productivity workstation, the Godlike gives you pretty much all the connectivity you would need. This thing has 10 gigabit LAN plus 5 gig LAN, so you got dual LAN, you got tons of USB-C, tons of USB-A, you got a 20 gigabit with quick power charge delivery, provided your case like this ProArt supports that. So the Godlike supports that as well. So It has like all the modern features. This is basically like as close to building a Mac desktop without the Apple Silicon and the Apple operating system. In terms of like the speed on the USB 4 is basically Thunderbolt 4. So it's basically got all the productivity things that someone who needs a workstation would actually use. Providing all the connectivity as well, 5 M.2s, no lane sharing for gaming, multi-GPU support. It's got it all, man. And that's the reason why I ended up getting the Godlike, because it was the one motherboard that it achieves everything that I need a motherboard to give me for productivity. But it turns out you can also overclock on it, and it's a 10-layer PCB, so you can run a ton of RAM at high speed, and you can even game on it. So it's got all the RGB gamer stuff too. So it basically hits every single checkbox. The Godlike can basically, it can fit any use case for AM5. Like hands down. There's no compromise. There's no worry about lane sharing. None of that. So it's like, it's super good. But it is like buying, it's like buying a Mac. It's not as expensive as a Mac, but you guys get what I'm saying. You're paying a lot of money for the, I guess, all the stuff that you don't even know you need. That's the way I usually say it. You're buying something that has features that you don't even know that you need, if that makes sense. So it's basically, I don't need to worry about any other AM5 motherboard until AM6 at this point by buying something like this. Yes, of course it will take the AverMedia. I will be plugging the AverMedia in the very bottom slot. I'm going to run dual capture cards, guys. I'm going to run the Thunderbolt external capture card on the back, and I'm going to run the internal 4K 60 capture card at the bottom. So I will do like a follow-up, probably a regular YouTube video showing the final build with everything in the computer. So I'll do that. So stay tuned for that. It's going to have a capture card in there. It's going to have a capture card at the back. It's basically going to have it's going to be fully loaded. Would you look at switching this out? Yes, I'm definitely going to consider that. That's a good question. Yes, there is a very high probability that I will be swapping the 9950X for a 9950X 3D next year. We're not going to be installing Windows. I don't have the SSD. We're literally streaming on the Windows PC. Once I'm done streaming, I'm going to take the SSDs out of the stream PC. I'm going to plug them in here. So there isn't going to be any Windows on this stream. I mean, good question, though. Okay. One for input, other for output, I assume. Yeah, you need a big case. And what was that? Something literally just fell. Oh, the ProArt shroud fell, whatever. Alright, guys, I think that's pretty much it. We are, how long have we been streaming? We've been over 3 hours. Alright, so that's a good stopping point. So, yeah, it's Thanksgiving tomorrow. So most people on holiday. I wanted to put this together before the holiday. But if you guys are traveling for the holidays, take care out there. And otherwise, I will see you guys tomorrow evening for the Tech Thursdays episode. And we'll probably be streaming from the Godlike. So stay tuned for that. Until then, happy Thanksgiving, everybody. And I will see you guys on Tech Thursdays. Take care.